A country of 60 million people is currently facing an all-out collapse of its power grid. But that's not all. You see, this country is also facing violent civil unrest, deep state corruption that is leading to assassination attempts on its industry leaders, and an economic crisis that is setting it up for a bloody and violent civil war. You see, South Africa is on the verge of collapse, and Western embassies, including the United States and Australia, have began advising their citizens in the country to stock up on a week's worth of food and water, and be on high alert during extended blackouts that are sweeping the country. New Zealand's Minister of Foreign Affairs even stated that those within the country should exercise extreme caution due to strikes and demonstrations. Recently, there have been outbreaks of violence primarily directed towards refugees and other African immigrants throughout South Africa. Violence that will continue to occur again and again with very little notice, and bystanders, they're getting caught in the fire. You see, South Africa is currently facing a snowball effect that is leading to its outright collapse. Rolling blackouts and warnings of a total power grid failure have begun to lead to mass rioting on the scale of a civil war. South Africa's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, declared a national state of disaster on February 9th in response to the record power grid collapse, which has been exacerbated by the state-owned power company, Eskom. You see, they have began instituting rolling blackouts, dubbing them load shedding. These load shedding blackouts can last up to 12 hours in some cases, with many lasting for many hours at a time. And this is a massive problem. These rolling blackouts are occurring throughout the entire country and are having a detrimental effect on private residencies, businesses, municipal lightings, traffic lights, and hotels. But that's not even the biggest issue. Blackouts can also affect water availability, internet connectivity, mobile phone network coverage, fuel availability, and probably most importantly, residential security features. And that's not even mentioning the most fatal effect, food supply. We'll come back to that shortly. The rolling blackouts have also provided the perfect opportunity for crime, which has seen a massive uptick. For example, traffic jams due to power outages provide opportunities for smash and grab crime. Or the lack of security systems within households or apartment complexes is leading to a massive increase in breaking and entering. And the continued failure of the power grid has created conditions that have led to a massive increase in protests and demonstrations. And as the days go on, violent civil unrest throughout the country. And this civil unrest has moved far beyond just simple protests, and by all accounts, is moving towards an all-out collapse. As stated at the beginning of the video, the U.S. Embassy this month advised citizens to maintain 72 hours worth of supplies at home by stockpiling non-perishable food, 3 liters of drinking water per person per day, and medicines and first aid supplies because of how volatile the situation currently is. But what may be an even stronger example of just how dire this situation looks to those on a geopolitical stage is that it comes after the U.S. government last month warned its stakeholders in South Africa to prepare for a total collapse of the power grid. You see, these rolling blackouts are bad enough, but a total power grid collapse? Well, that spells out disaster for South Africa. And the biggest dangers was not the idea of the grid collapse. Instead, it was the amount of time required to bring the system back online. In the best case scenario, estimates are that it would take 6 to 14 days to restart the power grid. You see, South Africa has few feeder lines from other countries, and not nearly enough to help with a total power grid collapse situation. And once the power grid was completely offline, the civil unrest facing South Africa would be nothing compared to the anarchy the country would face after days of no power. One official is quoted as saying, "The only thing that would be left after the blackout would be what's left after a civil war." What's even scarier is that some believe the collapse has already started. What they mean by this is that someone or some group is coordinating efforts to speed up the power grid's collapse, with reports increasing of co-coordinated attacks on water, power, and communications infrastructure. Here's how one citizen described the current situation on the ground. Looting is no longer just a daily thing, but is also now becoming more structured with guerrilla planning involved. Our roads no longer exist. Anything that is state-run is crumbling. Police, fire, and hospital resources for the state don't exist and are also slowly disintegrating. The cost of living is insane, with medical aid a luxury that most cannot afford, while food prices, they're going through the roof. And probably the most shocking statement, our murder rate is higher than the death rate in Ukraine's current conflict. Over the weekend, the Sunday Times reported key industries across South Africa have begun preparing for a total grid collapse, installing backup power to ensure critical services such as telecommunications and food retail could remain operational for a short time. And this power grid collapse is coming at a very poor time economically for South Africa. Currently, the country has an inflation rate of 6.9% and 32.9% unemployment. Adding to its financial woes, the currency has plummeted close to levels last seen during the height of the pandemic in 2020, after the country was graylisted by a global anti-money laundering body. For those that don't know, the Financial Action Task Force graylisting indicates to financial institutions that a country is not fully compliant with the anti-money laundering and terrorist financing standards. And if all of that wasn't enough, there also appears to be some level of high-level corruption behind the scenes. You see, amid the dire power grid crisis, the outgoing chief executive of Eskom gave a bombshell interview detailing the scale of corruption plaguing the public utility. In this interview, he noted that he had survived a suspected cyanide assassination attempt in December. In this account, Andre de Ruyter fell ill after drinking a cup of coffee suspected to have been laced with cyanide at his Johannesburg office on December 13th. This was just a day after tendering his resignation in the face of political pressure and alleging that an unnamed senior MP in the ruling ANC party was involved in systematic corruption at Eskom. With an impending collapse of a power grid in a country that is already facing a desperate economic situation, and state actor corruption so deep that it has led to assassination attempts on leaders of state-owned enterprises, the situation in South Africa is dire, and all signs are pointing towards an all-out collapse. Another conflict that's happening in 2023 is, of course, the Ukraine war. If you want to know what's going to happen this year, make sure to watch this video.